Hello and welcome to episode 26 of the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players of the gigging variety. I'm your host, David Holloway, and it's great as always to be here with you. And a huge welcome again to Paul Bindig.
Hi, David.
Lovely to have you here. And we're doing a bit of a first here, Paul. So we're talking to a bit of is it fair to say icon? I'd argue David's an icon.
I would have thought so with the people he's worked with and what he's achieved in his career, for sure.
Yeah. So David K Mathews is who we're talking to, and the reason I say this is a first is this is the first of two parts. So we had such a ball talking to David, and his career is so extensive that we decided to just keep on talking and come up with two episodes out of it because there literally is so much fascinating stuff there. So, David K Mathews, as you'll hear in both this and the next episode, has played with everyone from Tower of Power and Etta James and Santana. And there's I'm looking at the list here, there's literally about another 80 people there, including TV and all sorts of genres, just amazing. So, in part one, you'll hear the first half or so of David's career, and I think you'll enjoy it. Dave, thanks so much for joining us. You're a busy man and we appreciate you taking the time.
Happy to be here. Thanks to both of you for even considering to interview me. And I've been to, I think my first time to Australia might have been in 2014. I've always wanted to go there. I know a little bit about the history of the country, and I'm happy to get my music out there, our music out there into the world, and certainly, to your lovely, lovely continent there.
Yes, we're very privileged to be here. That's for certain. Now, Dave, what we've been asking people for quite a few months now is how they're keeping busy in these challenging times, in this challenging year. So, what have you been up to the past few months to kick things off?
Well, some light practicing on the piano mostly. A little bit of recording. I have some recording gear here. I'm not really well versed on using it, but I have a lot of keyboards here that I've collected over the last few years, and I've done a few overdub sessions for people that have just been kind of reaching out to me and asking me to play on things. And I've done a little bit of recording, a little bit of practicing, trying to work on arranging a little bit of original instrumental music from a couple of good friends of mine. One who played on my last record, a guy I've worked with for a long time. And a lot of, and I plan starting in the spring, in the middle of March, when our first Santana European tour was canceled. Being at home, I have a large yard, and so in the back, I have a large backyard, and I decided to plant some vegetables. So I've been actually growing vegetables. First time. I'm really an amateur, but I planted a lot of tomatoes, especially, and I had a huge tomato harvest. Over 15 plants. The tomatoes are finally just giving out right now. But literally, I planted a bunch of heirloom tomato plants, and I've literally been harvesting hundreds of tomatoes over the last few months. So I've been gardening some, which is, I have to say, it's good. You get out there, you get out in the sunshine, you get a little bit of exercise. I've been swinging a shovel, moving dirt, digging holes, watering things, and eating some nice fresh vegetables too.
Yeah, doesn't get any better than that. You feel like you're being productive, and it's rewarding. Couldn't agree more.
Exactly, because with the music, our industry basically is dead in the water right now, with the exception of some online things that people are doing. And it's just, we're the entertainment industry. People come to see us perform. The concert performance industry is pretty much dead right now. Hopefully that will improve later on in the year.
Exactly. And just a note to you, Paul, if we ever start up a Keyboard Players Talk Gardening podcast, Dave's the first guest for episode 1.
Yeah, absolutely. I reckon it'd be excellent. Actually, I have to confess, Dave, I did have a bit of a stalk of your Facebook page, so I did see all your the fruits of your labours and all the gardening you were doing. So we were going to ask you about that. So I'm glad you brought it up. That's excellent.
Well, I think like Dave said there that it's therapeutic in the sense that it gives you a feeling of accomplishing something at a time when maybe you're somewhat isolated at home, can't get out so much, can't travel so much, and it's positive. You see things growing, and it's kind of a good feeling. So it's a positive, and I think we all need as many positives as we can rack up these days.
Oh, I think too. I imagine for a creative person, gardening is a very creatively minded endeavour too. I mean, you're literally creating something. So why not? It makes perfect sense to me.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's growing things, watching them grow, and it can be satisfying. And I had a couple incidents with gophers, some pests there eating some of my vegetables, and that was a little frustrating. I'm kind of working around that, and you think everything's going so well, and then you're like, hey, wait a minute. There were some plants right now, and now they're over there. Now there's just some holes in the ground, and it's also a kind of a reminder that we're not alone here on the planet, and we're all there's a lot of other creatures that are also trying to make their lives and livelihoods, and so it's been kind of interesting in that regard too.
Yeah,
kind of helps put you back in touch a little bit with the earth. It's not just about getting in your car and driving somewhere.
Exactly. And you've also probably given us, this is the 26th episode, Dave, you've probably given us the best ever segue to the question about a potted history of the guest. So, it's a great segue from gardening to potted histories. So what I'm after is you to just give us a little bit of an insight into your formative years that led you to kicking off a career in music. So we're obviously going to get onto your career, but it's just those formative years and what got you into playing.
I was it's kind of funny. A lot of I was adopted, as was my brother. We were brought up in the San Francisco Bay Area. I was adopted at a young age, and this is some stuff that I've always known that I was adopted, but in the last about a year, since last Christmas, through DNA technology and everything, I've been able to reconnect with, or to connect for the first time with members of my biological family that are still living. And I found out that I actually have 6 siblings.
Wow.
I have 3 paternal half brothers and a paternal half sister of various ages, and then 2 maternal half brothers that are just a little bit younger than me. So that's been kind of shocking. That's been kind of shocking, and it's been very emotional. And I posted a lot of it on my Facebook page. If you go back to after the new year last year, I posted a lot of stuff about it. And I don't, social media for me is generally, in this day and age of sort of media whoredom, and what's the word I'm trying to think of? Titillation and people just putting everything out there. Social media for me I find it useful in terms of putting music out there and stuff like that. As far as helping my career to a certain extent, and then some things about family family and friends, which really at the end of the day, especially when you get older, I think that you find it, those are actually a lot, those issues are a lot more important than a lot of the material things that people tend to look at. So I'm kind of going down a slightly off of the tangent from where your question was, but my adopted parents, my dad, Tom, and my mother, Dorothy, couldn't have children of their own,
Right.
and so they adopted my older brother and I. My dad was a World War II combat veteran of the U.S. Army. Worked in various construction jobs in the San Francisco Bay Area after World War II. Went to UC Berkeley on the GI Bill. Met my mother. They married in maybe 1947 or 1948, and they were actually older than a lot of parents of their generation. My dad was born in 1924.
Okay.
My mother was born in 1928, and I was born in 1959. So my mother was, I think my father was 35 and my mom was 30 when they brought me into the family.
Yeah.
I was a little bit of a problematic kid, and in the sense that, I was a pretty high strung, high energy, a little bit difficult to handle. And my mother played the piano a little bit, and my father loved Dixieland and traditional jazz, and there was always music in our house growing up, whether it was like easy listening radio that you would hear during the day when I was home. And we're talking in the early 1960s, 1962, 1963. You'd hear anything from Nat King Cole to Perry Como to Frank Sinatra to my dad liked Fats Waller and Jelly Roll Morton. He liked traditional jazz, which was a little bit of a anomaly he was not a musician and it was not particularly musical, though he liked to dance a little bit and he liked to have a good time. So my parents realized pretty early on that, I would sing along with the radio and I seemed to be musical. And so when we had an old upright piano in the house that my mom used to play, just a little bit. And so they thought it might be a good idea for me to play a musical instrument. And they asked me if I wanted to play the piano. And they had one in the house. And I said, and I'd already kind of banged on it a little bit. And I said, yeah, sure. So I took piano lessons from about age 7 till maybe age 12 or 13 with a lady teacher that lived locally. And I learned to read music, at least the notes. I didn't learn that much about reading rhythms. I learned to read music in an elementary fashion. Not very well, but she used flashcards to help me learn the notes on the staff. And I was able to learn some simple pieces in simple keys like C or G or something with no black keys or sharps. Like a lot of kids. So I took some piano lessons and was always interested in music. By that point, I was hearing a lot of stuff on the radio. My parents thought I might be musical. So by the time I was about 12, I started, my parents would go to church sometimes. And so I started meeting other kids that liked to play and also maybe just around the neighborhood. There were some kids that liked to play music. And so I got involved in playing in a couple of little groups, we'd get together and play surf tunes or something. It's like a lot of kids. So I had some lessons, learned some simple things, and my teacher discovered that I had perfect pitch, so I was able to hear things easily and kind of follow along. And by the time I was 12 or 13, I was jamming with other kids, trying to play songs that were on the radio or stuff like that. And then it just kind of, when I got into high school, I didn't do very well in school at all. So when I got into high school, I played we had a cruddy jazz band at our high school, and I played trumpet from junior high. I played trumpet for about 4 years, maybe from about the sixth grade through my freshman year in high school. I only went to high school for 2 years anyway. So I got involved in music, like my parents put it out there, and I got into it. And by the time I was 12 or 13, by the time I was 9 or 10, I had played some little recitals for a teacher, played some simple classical pieces, heard other pianists, boys and girls playing, and I liked it. I wasn't shy about performing. I liked music, and even though I wasn't really that disciplined, I seemed to have a natural affinity for it. So that's kind of, it's been a progression ever since then. 50. I've been playing the piano now for over 50 years, and I'm still just a student for the most part. I'm really kind of working on it, trying to get better.
As our listeners would have heard from our introduction, you have had and are still having an exceptionally long and successful career, and played with so many amazing artists. And it would be really impossible for us to try and encapsulate all of that within the time that we have available to us in the podcast today, Dave. But I was hoping you could maybe pick, say, 3 key career highlights for you. So 3 things out of all the people that you've worked with, out of all the things you've done, that really have stood out as being particularly important to you in your musical journey.
Well, that's pretty easy. Growing up in the Bay Area, it's a very eclectic radio listening situation here. Certainly when I was growing up, and one of the bands that I heard probably when I was about 15. So I've been playing in these little rock bands and playing simple songs, but around the age of 15, I started kind of getting out of the suburbs and out into the outer lying areas of the Bay Area, and playing more soul music, more R&B based music, and playing and starting to get little gigs. And that's about the first time I heard Tower of Power, was probably when I was about 15. So, which would be, and actually I saw them play at Kezar Stadium on a big festival bill in, I think it was, must have been around 1975. So I was 15 or 16.
Yep.
And they're what's known as a funk band. They're like one of the greatest funk bands of all time.
Gotcha.
Funk is in East Bay funk is what we call it in the Bay Area, particularly coming out of the Oakland area, the eastern shore of the San Francisco Bay, as opposed to what was happening coming out of San Francisco, like with Sly and the bands over there. Even though I think Sly might have been from Vallejo, but originally, but East Bay funk was kind of it's a regional phenomenon. And I first heard TOP when I was about 15, and I was kind of blown away. The record that I heard was called "In the Slot," which is probably, in my opinion, one of the most jazzy albums. Anyway, that influenced me. There was a lot of good jazzy improvisation. There was a lot of good funk, a lot of syncopation. You had Chester Thompson, the great Hammond organist, who really he was in his prime at that time, and he put his stamp on that band, along with the great writing, the great arranging of Greg Adams, and the great playing of like saxophonist Lenny Pickett, the horn section, the 5-piece horn section, the syncopation. We just lost Rocco Francis Rocco Prestia, the original and iconic bass player for the band. The band's it's a tradition. It's a Bay Area tradition. It's also kind of a school, just like maybe the Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers or the Horace Silver group in the jazz world. TOP, there've been a lot of singers over the year. There've been a lot of people go through the band, but there's only been about 3 keyboard players, actually, maybe 4. And I was, though Jay Spell did record on a couple of the early records. He was a pianist. That was my first national gig. I was 23 when I joined that band. I knew several of the guys in the band because they were acquainted with other musicians that I knew at that time from other bands. So that would be number one. I'd have to say Tower of Power, number one, because that was my first national touring gig.
And Dave, do you mind if we delve into that a little bit? So I'm thinking what we'll do is for each of those 3, go a little bit deeper as well. So, sorry, Paul, I'll let you jump back in a sec. But I mean, the thing that stands out for me is Tower of Power. You're absolutely right. It's an iconic outfit. And what stands out for me is every time you watch a video clip, no matter what the era is, but particularly those first 10, 15 years, is the discipline and the stagecraft, and let alone the musicianship of it. How intimidating did you find it joining those guys and actually doing those first rehearsals?
Well, that's the funny thing. Just like with the Santana band, I didn't rehearse. At the time I joined Tower of Power, I'd grown up and been listening to that. I was 23, so I'd been listening to their music for 8 or 9 years. And growing up in the Bay Area, I played in other bands where we played some Tower of Power songs. I was pretty friendly acquaintances with Doc, Stephen Kupka, one of the 2 primary songwriters, the baritone sax player, the Funky Doctor. I knew him, and I knew Mick Gillette, the lead trumpet player, because those guys would hang out together and come and sit in with a band that I played with at the time when I was 19 and 20 that had members of Elvin Bishop's Fool Around and Fell in Love touring band from like 1974, like Elvin's biggest commercial thing. The Tower of Power Horns had collaborated, I think, with Elvin on some things. So there was a community of musicians that kind of knew each other. And I was playing with some of those people from the Elvin Bishop of that particular time, of the Elvin Bishop family, you could say. That's how I got to know some of the TOP guys. Plus, the lead alto player, the sax player that had replaced Lenny Pickett, Mark Russo, was a friend of mine that I'd known since I was a teenager and had played in bands with him. So joining the band, I knew 3 or 4 of the guys already. And I wasn't intimidated. I was excited, and it was a good fit for me. But in joining the band, I mean, idolizing Chester Thompson as a Hammond B3 player, I was very conscious that when he left the band, he was 37 or 38 years old and really at the top of his game. I was very conscious when I joined the band that I had some big shoes to fill in that regard. And I had some different musical perspectives that he had. So I felt good about that. But at the same time, joining the band, I'd played Hammond organ in some funk bands, but I didn't play bass pedals, and not that was something that was really necessary for me to do with Tower of Power, but I wanted to do it because I was I'm such a fan of CT, and he's a friend, I'm happy to say. So there were times in the first year and a half, some other musical friends have told me that they like the fact that I really tried to evoke the Chester Thompson vibe in terms of what I tried to play. I tried to copy things that he had done on the albums. but I mean, as an improviser, I'm 23 years old. I wasn't a jazz player at that time. I was interested in jazz, but I didn't really, CT was a legitimate jazz organist, one of the best actually. And so I became conscious pretty soon that, even though I was fitting in with the band in a funky context and could contribute some good things, I wasn't an improviser. In my opinion, really, CT was really the best, if you want to say, quote unquote, jazz improviser in the band at that time. I think that Lenny Pickett and Chester were the main soloists, the best soloists in the band. Bruce Conti also played some jazz influenced kinds of things and some bluesy things, and it's a good improviser too. But so I pretty soon, by the time I was 24 or so, I was like saying to myself, well, I'm trying to be as good as CT, but I'm just not. And I've got a lot of work to do. And that was it was motivating for me, because that was the first band to where I was playing on a national stage, going to New York, playing at the Bottom Line, having well-known musicians sit in with us, whether it was Will Lee or Hiram Bullock from the Letterman Band, or Paul Schaefer, or going out. I'd go out to the Blue Note and listen to people like Joey Calderazzo and Nils Van Doke, and really good jazz piano players. And I was realizing, I was going, man, I've got a nice gig here and it's cool, but I got a lot of shit to learn. So I wasn't intimidated by the gig, but after getting the gig, it just made me want to get that much better, because you never know who you might end up playing with. Bernard Purdy one night, or you might end up playing with Cornell Dupree, or Delbert McClinton might come sit in, or Phoebe Snow might come in and sit in with the band, or John Sebastian, and you just wanted to be the best player that you could be. And the other thing too is that I was 23, 24 years old, and the majority of the band were in their early to mid 30s. And most of them at that time had drug and alcohol problems. And at that time, I drank, but I had quit doing. When I found out I was going to be a father back in 1982, I had quit drugs, cocaine, LSD, pills, marijuana. I had quit all that stuff cold turkey. And the guys in that band at that time, most of them had problems. And so I was coming from a perspective of a younger, hungry musician, playing with some legendary guys that were struggling, that were sometimes struggling, and it was I was the youngest guy in the band, like most of the bands that I had been in up to that point. Now it's not the case anymore, but for a lot of my career, I was the youngest person in the band. Of course, now I'm 61, so it's not. That's not really the case anymore. Yeah.
Just from an outsider's perspective, Dave, watching Tower of Power, it appears the impression you get is you need to be very, very disciplined to play that gig and do what's required. But I'm also really interested, was it also sort of fun and loose as well when it needed to be?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Tower was influenced by, it's a soul band. It's a soul band. It's a funk band. They're innovators in the funk, in the creation of funk music. At the same time, there were a lot of influences there that maybe even at the time I wasn't necessarily aware of. And, influences on people like David Garibaldi or Rocco or Doc and Mimi or Bruce, influences as diverse as, and particularly for the style of funk that they created, influences, certainly like on Bruce, I'd say, influences like Bobby Womack in terms of his guitar playing, soul music in general, certainly James Brown, on the Tower as a whole, the Meters out of New Orleans, Bernard Purdy and Chuck Rainey in the rhythms, that rhythm section. I know that Rocco talked about the influences of James Jameson and Gerald Jamot, Jerry Jamot, particularly, who also played with Aretha. And they practiced. They did a lot. They did a lot of rehearsals together. Like certainly before I joined the band, they wrote songs. They worked on their craft. They played numerous gigs. And they had fun, and they were also getting high like crazy. But yeah, they had fun, and they developed a really original, really a very original thing. TOP's it's coming on maybe 52 or 53 years now. It's an institution. Proud to have been there for like 2.5 years.
Yeah.
I was not really in over my head necessarily, but it was. I got, the band wasn't making a lot of money. They didn't have a record deal at that time, and the gigs started paying less and less. And Emilio decided to cut the band down because he got another lead vocalist. He had a lead vocalist, Ellis Hall, who played keyboards. And instead of carrying a B3 and a Fender Rhodes and a ARP string ensemble and a clavinet and synthesizers in the truck, they could have Ellis sing and play his little Casio keyboard, and that's kind of all they needed. I mean, he's a great singer, and he's a good keyboard player, also a great bass player and guitarist and drummer too. He's like another Stevie Wonder. So I got cut economically. It was like, we don't really need to carry this keyboard player, all this stuff. We've got this guy who sings and plays keyboards, and we can all make a little more money. So at age 25. Or I might have been 26. I got let go from the band, and I wasn't hurt or upset by it. I just was like, well, okay, that's over, and now I got to try to find some other things, to do.
Which is a great
and keep getting better.
Yeah, it's a great perspective too, Dave. And so obviously, I mean, when that was over, what was, as I said, we can't sadly talk about the whole career. So what was the second key highlight for you post Tower of Power?
Well, actually, it's kind of interesting because I'd have to say that it would be, I'm not going to say a band necessarily, because there was a club in Berkeley, California, about one block south of the UC Berkeley campus called Larry Blake's Rathskeller. And Larry Blake's Rathskeller was a college hangout, a UC Berkeley hangout, and it was a legitimate blues club. I've been playing blues, real blues, probably since about age 19 or 20, along with playing funk and R&B and Afro-Cuban and Latin jazz music, kind of all concurrently. And so, what happened is playing Larry Blake's. There's the guy who ran the music there, who put the music together, was a guitarist named Tim Kaihatsu. He passed away in 2014. He's a dear, dear friend of mine. And he was a blues guitarist, but he could also play a variety of other styles. And he kind of got his start playing. Well, he played rhythm guitar on a couple early Buddy Guy albums, and he played with Charlie Musselwhite in the late 60s, actually. And he put together a music calendar down here at Larry Blake's, that there was music 7 nights a week. Local jazz artists played at Larry Blake's. Local Afro-Cuban and Latin jazz and Brazilian musicians played there, and a lot of blues acts played there. Etta James played there. Otis Rush played there. Tracy Nelson played there. Let me think of some other. I'm trying to think of God. I'd have to go look at the list of. But anyway, I've been playing with Tim since I was about 19. I met him when I was about 19 or 20. So playing at Larry Blake's, not only did I play a lot of blues with a lot of local blues artists and a lot of gigs with him, also, once again, there were connections to some members of various versions of Elvin Bishop's bands, also versions of Charlie Musselwhite's early bands, also Pete Escovedo, who I just played with the other night, his daughter Sheila E., the Escovedo family, which is they're the Bay Area Latin jazz equivalents to maybe the Brubeck family,
okay,
or possibly the Peterson family from Minneapolis. And they were, Pete had played with Santana. Sheila had played with Santana played with her. She was a high-end session, Latin session player, playing with Herbie Hancock, people like that. So this club, Larry Blake's, not only would you run into people like from the Tower of Power band, you'd run into various blues artists. You run into various jazz artists. It was kind of a mecca of stuff. Various Latin jazz thing. I would have to say that playing with, I kind of have to make it kind of a dual thing. Playing it was called the Rat Band, R-A-T,
okay,
which is short for the Rathskeller. Playing with the Rat Band with Tim Kaihatsu, and at the same time playing with Pete and Sheila Escovedo with guitarist Ray Oviedo. We would play also at Larry Blake's occasionally. So it's really kind of two bands from the same period.
yeah,
And through the Pete and Sheila, through the Escovedo family, I got to know the Bay Area Latin and Latin rock and Latin jazz community, which kind of led me to Santana all these years later through those connections. But I also got to know a lot of the Bay Area blues and R&B community through Larry Blake's Rathskeller in Berkeley, which closed maybe 5 years ago.
okay.
So that would be the second. So it's really two different discrete groups of musicians in one. But as typical in the Bay Area, things tended to interreact and
yes.
intertwine.
And what did you feel you learnt? I mean, you obviously had even though being young, had a hell of a lot of experience under your belt by the time you commenced this phase. What are the big learnings you got out of that period?
Well, how to really play the blues and play with harmonica players, play with a variety of guitar players of different styles. I learned that the blues is not just B.B. King, the blues is a whole range of. We could go back to Louis Armstrong and New Orleans or whatever, and other things. But the blues, the quote unquote blues style, as people, when they think of blues, whether they think of Buddy Guy or Stevie Ray Vaughan or B.B. King or Bobby Bland or John Lee Hooker or whatever, the blues is all of those things. But the blues is just as wide ranging as jazz is, in the sense that the blues can be from a really primitive Southern Delta styles with slide guitar and maybe harmonica and no bass or maybe no drums. It could be it can run the range from something like Huddy Ledbetter or Leadbelly or Lightning Hopkins or John Lee Hooker or heading from the south into Texas. It could be, you could get into early modern, more urban blues. You can get into Chicago, you can get into New Orleans. The blues has been certainly, Jelly Roll Morton was playing and writing blues songs in the early 1900s. It can go all the way, you've got blues in New Orleans, whether it's Professor Longhair and the styles from that city, and I'm talking about piano now, but you can get into Texas, you can get into T-Bone Walker, you can get into more urban styles, you can get into Bobby Bland, BB. It's African American music, which is one of our greatest cultural legacies in this country, whether it be jazz or blues. But what I learned about playing that is I learned that the blues is an incredibly wide and disparate genre, if you want to use the word genre. And the same thing I learned about Afro-Cuban and quote unquote Latin music. What, you've got Brazilian music, you've got Cuban music, you got music from Puerto Rico, you got music from all the Caribbean islands, you've got calypso, it's once again, a lot of the roots are in Africa, also mixed with some Western influences as well. And so I learned a lot about those things, and the Bay Area is a great place for that because it's a pretty diverse musical community here. And in order to make a living, a lot of times musicians have to not necessarily just specialize and play one style. You got to be versatile. And fortunately for me, I have an interest in all those kinds of music. So it was a fortuitous kind of a thing living in this area because there's a lot of different diverse influences that you can to listen to. And that's always been my thing. I'm kind of the guy that knows how to play a lot of different styles. I have eclectic tastes, and that's actually benefited me throughout my career.
Absolutely.
And in a quick to finish this thought, it's kind of funny. Like in the Bay Area, there might be a lot of blues gigs, at certain times of the year, and then maybe in the summertime, when the weather would get warm, well, there might be more Latin gigs. People are outside, people want to dance and everything, and the weather's good. And so consequently, different times of the year, I might be studying and practicing harder on one particular style because the majority of the work that I was going to be doing that month would be related to that style, whether it's blues or Afro-Cuban music or soul or whatever. Like the more gigs you get, and you've got to learn songs, you've got to learn the idiom and the things to play. So you'd spend. Necessity is the kind of the key there. Whatever you need to do to work and play well in that particular musical situation is what you would work on the most at that time.
All right, so there's part one done, Paul, and as you know, that's just a bit of a teaser for the second half.
Yeah, look, obviously a passionate, eloquent guy, very generous with his thoughts, and I got a lot out of that, and looking forward to the next part, which our listeners will be able to hear very soon.
I've always wanted to do something that has a to be continued, and this is it. So, so yes, we'll be back again in a fortnight or so with part two. But just a reminder, in the meantime, you can keep in touch via a few means. Our website is www.keyboardchronicles.com. Facebook is facebook.com/Keyboard Chronicles. And we've got good old-fashioned email at editor@keyboardchronicles.com. We do have a Patreon account where if you do want to, for the price of a coffee, help us go from strength to strength, that's at patreon.com/Keyboard Chronicles as well. So thank you, Paul. We'll be back for part two. And most importantly, thanks to you for listening, and we'll see you back then.